High in the sky, Nausicaä flies her glider, the moe, above a sea of clouds. Her flight takes her over the sea of corruption, a toxic jungle filled with giant fungi. Nausicaä lands at the edge of the jungle and walks into the imposing forest with her rifle. Deep inside the bizarre landscape of towering fungi and strange insects, she remains alert. She investigates the ground and notices marks that she identifies as belonging to an ohmu, a giant insect not normally found in that area. She follows the tracks deeper into the forest. Her search leads her to a clearing where she finds the massive, freshly shed exoskeleton of an ohmu. Standing at its base, she marvels at its size and beauty. Climbing on top of the shell, she determines that it is still fresh from that morning. She tests the shell's strength by striking it with her ceramic knife. The material is so hard that it bounces the blade back, stinging her hand and chipping the knife. Realizing the material would be perfect for making armor, she looks at the enormous eye shields and thinks one would make an excellent gunship canopy. Deciding to take one of the eye shields, Nausicaä modifies a flare gun and uses it to create two small explosions, which cleanly detach two of the giant lenses from the main shell. She taps one of the huge, clear lenses she has taken, listening to the hard, ringing sound it produces. Spores begin to fall around her like snow, and she sits on the shell, holding a lens over her head like an umbrella. She thinks about how humans cannot survive in the toxic air without a mask. Suddenly, she receives a powerful psychic message from an unknown source, a voice screaming in her mind with pain and anger. Jolted by the mental cry, she sits up in alarm. The voice continues its furious assault inside her head, and Nausicaä realizes it is not human. The being's overwhelming sadness turns to violent rage. She tries to communicate with the unseen presence, asking it to identify itself, but the connection is violently severed. Back in reality, the voice is gone, but she hears a new sound, a siren shell, a type of alarm. Realizing the forest insects must be attacking someone, she climbs up the terrain to get a better view. She emerges onto the massive skull of a long-dead insect. From this high vantage point, she looks through her binoculars and sees a swarm of insects. To her horror, she sees a massive, enraged ohmu is with them, attacking someone. Believing the person is heading in the wrong direction to escape, Nausicaä decides to intervene. She fires a signal flare to get their attention. Seeing a response, she knows they are coming toward her. She runs back to her glider, quickly mounts it, and takes off, leaving the heavy ohmu lens behind. Nausicaä pilots her glider with determination. Flying low over a wasteland bordering the toxic jungle, she spots two figures running with bird-like mounts. Nausicaä flies down next to the man, Master Yupa, and his mounts, Kai and Kui, shouting for them to go upwind. The air suddenly fills with debris, and Nausicaä skillfully navigates her glider through the chaos. The source of the destruction is a giant, multi-eyed insect known as an ohmu, which is crashing through the forest in a rage. Nausicaä holds on tight as her small glider is tossed about in the violent whirlwind. The ohmu slams one of its huge legs into the ground, shaking the earth. Nausicaä flies her glider upward to escape a swarm of smaller insects that rise from the ground. From a safe height, she looks down at the rampaging creature in awe. She realizes it is the same ohmu whose shed shell she had found earlier that morning. She notes that the ohmu is blind with rage, chasing Yupa far from its home in the forest. Deciding she must calm the creature, Nausicaä pulls out a small device. She throws it, and it detonates in a bright flash. She flies directly in front of the giant insect, trying to guide it back to the forest to stop it from spreading toxic spores. The Ohmu's enormous compound eyes are dark and unreadable. Nausicaä sees that its eyes are burning ruby red with anger, and wonders if this was the creature whose pained cry she heard in her mind earlier. She dismisses the thought and decides to use a stronger method to stop it. Her glider releases 3 small spheres onto the ground below. The spheres bounce and let off small bursts of light and sound. These bursts erupt into blinding flashes, forcing Yupa to shield his eyes as Nausicaä's glider flies through the intense glare. The Ohmu is caught in the disorienting flashes. Yupa recognizes the devices as strobe grenades. A thick cloud of dust and smoke fills the air. As it clears, the Ohmu is seen covered by the smaller insects. The colossal creature has stopped moving completely. Yupa then hears a high-pitched, rhythmic sound and recognizes it as a worm-flute, realizing Nausicaä intends to calm the insects peacefully. In the sky, Nausicaä plays the instrument. She circles above the pacified Ohmu, the sound of the flute signaling to the insects that the danger has passed and it is time to go back to the forest. The swarm of insects rises from the Ohmu's back in response. Nausicaä leads them back towards the forest, still playing the flute. Yupa watches in amazement at her ability to communicate with them. The calm Ohmu turns and follows the swarm back toward the sea of corruption. Yupa waves, indicating that he will go on ahead. Nausicaä flies over the tree line as the Ohmu's tail disappears back into the toxic jungle. High above the forest, she says a silent farewell to the creature. With her task complete, she pilots her glider away from the jungle. The scene changes to a vast desert wasteland near the Valley of the Wind, where Master Yupa waits with his mounts. A glider is seen flying towards him. The pilot's boots slide to a stop in the sand upon landing. The pilot, a person in a cloak, catches their glider. The pilot is revealed to be Nausicaä, who runs joyfully toward Master Yupa. Yupa happily catches her in a hug. He laughs, happy to see how much she has grown, and acknowledging that she saved his life. They embrace warmly, noting it has been over a year since they last met. As they hug, Nausicaä notices something. A small, furry squirrel fox named Teto peeks out from a pouch on Yupa's belt. Yupa remembers the hissing animal, noting it has been a lot of trouble. Nausicaä recognizes the creature. Yupa explains that he had mistaken it for a human baby and shot at a large insect that was carrying it off, which is what enraged the Ohmu. Nausicaä learns that the squirrel fox was unconscious and did not inhale any of the forest's poisons, and she gently approaches it. She extends her finger toward the hissing animal. Yupa warns her against it, but she persists. Tito climbs onto Nausicaa's shoulder as she speaks to it calmly. Suddenly, Tito bites her finger hard, drawing blood. Yupa is shocked. Unfazed, Nausicaä calmly reassures the creature, which begins to relax. Tito then gently licks the blood from her finger. Nausicaä holds the creature close, telling it that everything is all right now. She asks a stunned Yupa if she can keep Tito, and he agrees. Nausicaä then joyfully greets Yupa's mounts, Kui and Kai. Yupa watches her, amazed by her mysterious ability to connect with animals, especially a squirrel fox, which is known for never taking to people. While tending to the mounts, Nausicaä mentions they may have to leave for the front as soon as the next day. She explains that her people have received a mobilization order for a war. With a determined look, she states that she will be going in place of her father. Yupa is shocked to hear that Nausicaä is going to war. He protests, but she explains that it was a decision she and her father made together. Her father said it was time for her to take up the family's weapons. Yupa realizes this is because her father's body has been weakened by the forest's poisons. Nausicaä confirms this, accepting it as the destiny of those who live beside the sea of corruption. After Yupa expresses regret for not visiting sooner, Nausicaä reassures him and says there is something she wants him to see. The location changes to the edge of the Valley of the Wind. Nausicaä points Yupa toward the castle in the distance and tells him she will fly ahead to announce his arrival. She takes off on her glider, waving goodbye. Yupa begins his journey down into the valley with his mounts, thinking about how much she has grown. The story shifts to the sky, where Nausicaä flies her glider over the Valley of the Wind towards a large castle. A narrator explains that 1,000 years have passed since the fall of an industrial civilization, and the valley is a small kingdom protected from the toxic sea of corruption by winds from the ocean. That night at the castle, the people of the valley gather to welcome Master Yupa. Inside a great hall, the villagers sit before a large tapestry. Nausicaä and others watch happily as Yupa arrives. Master Yupa presents a gift of special herbs to the castle's wise women, who are grateful for the life-saving medicine. Yupa then calls for the young women of the village. The scene changes to the king's room, where Nausicaä stands with her fox squirrel, Pejitei, beside her sick and bedridden father, King Jill. Back in the hall, Yupa gives beautiful stones to the young women as wedding gifts, and Nausicaä watches the happy moment. From his room, King Jill announces that Yupa's return is a cause for celebration. The villagers begin a great feast with food, music, and dancing. Yupa feels at ease in the valley, but also senses an underlying sadness. In his room, King Jill observes the feast and notes that the valley's population is shrinking. Yupa joins him, and Nausicaä offers him a drink. Yupa asks about what she wanted to show him, but she says it can wait until the next day, as everyone wants to hear his stories tonight. Later, in the hall, the villagers excitedly ask Nausicaä about her encounter with the Ohmu. In the king's room, Yupa tells Jill that Nausicaä has grown into a fine princess. Jill agrees, but expresses regret that she was not born a boy. He reveals that of his 11 children, only Nausicaä survived to adulthood. The location changes to a workshop where the villagers are working on a gunship aircraft. They use tools to shape a large piece of an Ohmu shell that Nausicaä found. Her friend, Uncle Mito, praises her lucky find. Excited, Nausicaä decides to take the gunship for a test flight and asks Mito to be her co-pilot. With the crew's help, they prepare for takeoff. The next day, the gunship speeds down a runway and soars into the sky. In his chambers, Yupa watches the aircraft and asks if Nausicaä is the pilot. King Jill proudly confirms this, praising his daughter's natural skill at reading the wind and noting that the people of the valley love her. Yupa then seriously asks Jill if he truly intends to send her to war. The king explains that their small country's independence relies on the gunship and an ancient treaty. This treaty requires the chieftain of the valley to serve the Toromician emperor as a gunship pilot. In the sky, outside the Valley of the Wind, a gunship aircraft flies at high speed. Inside, Nausicaä pilots the craft with her companion, Pejitei, on her shoulder. Her co-pilot, Mito, calls out their increasing speed, which is reaching dangerous levels. He shouts a warning to Nausicaä that they are flying too low to the ground. Unwavering, Nausicaä continues to push the gunship faster until the engine reaches its maximum power. They fly so low and fast that their wake shatters ancient petrified structures on the ground below. The location changes to high in the air, where the gunship and Nausicaä's glider, the Mev, fly together. Mito lectures Nausicaä for her foolishness, telling her she flies the large gunship as if it were her small glider. He warns that flying so low would make them an easy target in a real battle. Nausicaä turns and smiles, trying to ease his worry. Mito reminds her to treat the ship with care, as it is 100 years old and the last of its kind. Nausicaä thinks to herself that she prefers her Melve because it rides the wind, unlike the gunship which just cuts through it. Suddenly, Nausicaä is overcome by a strong psychic voice screaming in anger. She enters a trance-like state, sensing that the source of the cry is close. In her mind, she reaches out to the pained voice, trying to understand its powerful hatred and sadness. Sensing her distress, Tito lets out a sharp cry. Back in the physical world, Tito jumps at Nausicaä's face, snapping her out of the vision. Mito shouts in alarm as he sees Nausicaä let go of the controls. The uncontrolled gunship dives steeply toward the ground. Nausicaä, now alert, thanks Tito for saving her. Mito looks down in terror as the gunship's wing nearly scrapes the ground. Just before they crash, Nausicaä fires the vertical thrusters, blasting the gunship back up into the air. Now, flying level again, Nausicaä shouts new orders to a bewildered Mito, telling him to put on his mask because they are going to the Sea of Corruption. Mito is shocked by the sudden change of plans, but follows her orders to fly at combat speed, privately wondering if she has lost her senses. Nausicaä, now also wearing a mask, believes the psychic cry she heard was from an Ohmu. She concludes that somewhere in the toxic forest, someone is being attacked by the giant insects. Flying on her glider, Nausicaä soars over the vast sea of corruption before descending into the toxic fungal forest. The location changes to Nausicaä's gunship, now flying inside the forest. She feels a sense of dread as she gets closer to the source of the psychic disturbance she felt earlier. The gunship flies low over a strange, rocky landscape within the forest. Nausicaä and her companion Mito are suddenly shocked by what they see. In the distance is a massive, damaged airship. It is a freighter from a neighboring kingdom, and it is being completely swarmed by a chaotic mass of giant insects from the forest. The creatures are tearing the ship apart as explosions erupt from its hull. Nausicaä concludes that the ship must have landed in the forest, angering the insects. Seeing that its engines are still working, she decides to try and guide it to safety and tells Mito to raise the signal flags. From the gunship's wing, Mito deploys a striped signal kite. Nausicaä flies close to the freighter, using the flag to signal for it to follow them and turn. Inside the damaged ship, terrified women and children huddled together in fear. Mito realizes the vessel is full of refugees, and Nausicaä sees that its rudders are jammed by the insects, preventing it from turning. Nausicaä quickly forms a risky plan to use the gunship's main cannon to scare the insects off the rudders. Mito protests that it is too dangerous, but Nausicaä flies perilously close to the side of the freighter. The freighter's rudders are completely covered by a thick layer of insects. Nausicaä aims her cannons and, ignoring Mito's final warnings, braces for the dangerous maneuver. She pilots the gunship directly into the dense swarm of flying insects. The creatures slam into the gunship's canopy and wings. Mito screams for her to pull out. Nausicaä pushes forward, yelling at the insects to get out of her way. The maneuver works, and the blast from her cannons makes the insects fall away from the freighter's rudders. Now able to steer, the crew of the freighter fires their own cannons and pushes the engines to full throttle, climbing steeply to escape the swarm. As the last of the insects fall off their own gunship, Nausicaä and Mito watch the freighter begin to fly out of the forest. Mito thinks they are safe, but Nausicaä suddenly shouts in alarm, noticing something wrong with the freighter's wing. The damaged wing disintegrates, and the massive airship crashes into the ground in a huge explosion as Nausicaä watches in horror. Mito reasons that the insects must have chewed through the wing. Nausicaä immediately decides to land at the crash site. The location changes to the crash site. As another aircraft flies overhead, Nausicaä lands the gunship and runs out into the smoking wreckage to look for survivors. She is horrified by the death and destruction all around her. Mito observes that the victims are all women and children, and wonders what could have happened to the city of Pejitei. Suddenly, Nausicaä calls out to him, having found a young woman who is still alive among the bodies. She gives the survivor, named Rastel, an emergency mask. The dying woman thanks them for trying to save her ship. Mito recognizes from her clothing that she is the princess of Pejitei and asks if she has any last words. Rastel holds out a small stone object and begs them to give it to her older brother. She explains that their city of Pejitei was attacked the previous night by the Toromechian Empire. Her ship carried the only survivors, but they were pursued and forced to hide in the Sea of Corruption, where the insects found them. Mito is shocked, as Pejitei was an ally of Toromechiä. Rastel pleads with them to give the stone to her brother and never let the Toromechian emperor have it. Nausicaä promises she will honor this request. With her last breath, Rastel begs them again to promise. She then dies. As spores from the forest begin to fall like snow, Mito urges Nausicaä to return to their valley to warn everyone about what has happened to Pejitei. Suddenly, Nausicaä senses that something is approaching. They both look up in shock. A giant, multi-eyed insect called an Ohmu looms over the crash site. Nausicaä recognizes it as the same one she encountered the day before. Mito wants to run, but Nausicaä tells him to wait, noticing that the Ohmu's eyes are blue, meaning it is calm and not angry. She telepathically feels the creature's immense sadness and realizes that it is crying for all the people who have died. Elsewhere, a large, heavily armed Toromechian airship flies through the sky. Inside, armored soldiers are ready for deployment. A pilot in the cockpit spots the wreckage of a ship on the ground below. The scene changes to the air above the freighter's crash site. The Toromechian airship flies over the wreckage in the toxic jungle. An officer confirms it is the ship from Pejitei that had gotten away from them. Aboard the Toromechian ship, the commander orders a group of specialists known as worm handlers to be deployed. The large airship lands at the crash site. The worm handlers run out of the ship, carrying special tools and equipment. They use small slug-like creatures to investigate the area. The location changes to a platform on the side of the landed Toromechian ship. The commander and another officer watch the search from above. The officer expresses his dislike for the worm handlers, calling them savages who enjoy searching corpses. He mentions that the crew complains about their presence, but the commander replies that they are useful for a search. The officer states that they must find what they are looking for at any cost. Back at the crash site, the worm handlers search through the fungi and wreckage. The lead worm handler reports to the commander that the crash likely happened that morning. He explains that the scent of the object they seek is present, but the object itself is gone. He says his creatures found the scent was strongest on a body that had been carefully buried, and he holds up the crown that the body was wearing. The worm handler then points to signs that a small ship had landed nearby. The commander considers that this local ship must have taken the object. An order is given for everyone to prepare for immediate takeoff, and the worm handlers run back to the airship. The Toromechian corvette lifts off, and the commander announces they are heading for the Valley of the Wind. Far ahead of the approaching Toromechian ship, Nausicaä flies her glider at high speed through a canyon towards her home. The story moves to the Valley of the Wind. The villagers on the ground and in the towers wave as Nausicaa's gunship flies over the village towards the castle carved into the cliffside. The scene changes to a hangar in the Valley of the Wind. Villagers gather around the damaged gunship, worried about what has happened. Nausicaä leans out of the cockpit and urgently tells them there has been an incident. She warns them that there are still toxic spores in the cockpit and asks for fire wands to decontaminate the area. Nausicaä jumps through a ring of fire on the ground to burn any spores off her clothing, while villagers scold each other about the dangers of the sea of corruption. Another villager uses a special device to spray the gunship's cockpit and neutralize any remaining spores. The location is now inside the castle. Nausicaä quietly instructs Mito to reload the gunship's main guns and have it ready to fly at a moment's notice, but to tell no one else about what happened. She then runs urgently up a stone staircase. As she runs up the castle's outer stairs, she shouts to the Wind Watcher on a high balcony to tighten the guard. She bursts through a doorway, calling for her father. The scene shifts to King Gill's chambers. Nausicaä finds her father, King Gill, ill in bed. Seeing her distress, he sternly tells her to calm down. He lectures her that a leader must never lose control, because if the leader panics, the people will become alarmed. King Gill, whose body is weak and feels like it's turning to stone, reminds her that the valley's destiny is now on her shoulders, and she must remain calm in a crisis. Nausicaä bows her head and agrees. Once she has regained her composure, she tells her father that the city of Pejitei has been destroyed. She explains that there was only one refugee ship, but it was attacked by insects from the forest and crashed. King Gill is shocked, wondering why the Toromechian emperor would attack Pejitei, a friendly city. Nausicaä then shows him the small, faintly glowing object that Princess Rastel gave her. King Gill and an elder named Master Yupa examine it, agreeing that it seems to be a part from a very old machine. Gill speculates that it came from the deep mines in Pejitei, where they were excavating an ancient city. Master Yupa concludes that if the stone caused all this destruction, it must hold a mighty power. Nausicaä tells them she wants to honor her promise to Rastel and give the stone to her brother. The story moves to the cliffs of the Valley of the Wind, where lookouts spot a large Toromechian airship approaching. The ship flies menacingly over the castle. From a balcony, Nausicaä identifies it as an armored corvette. Down below, the villagers panic as the ship prepares to land near the village. The massive ship touches down, stirring up a great cloud of dust. The scene changes to King Gill's room. Nausicaä speaks with her ailing father, who tells her that this is her first trial as a leader and advises her to act with caution. Determined, Nausicaä runs through the castle to meet the intruders. From a lookout point, she sees that they have landed in a newly seeded field, which angers her because the contaminated ground will now have to be burned. In the field, heavily armed Toromechian soldiers and their worm handler mercenaries exit the landed ship. Nausicaä is horrified to see the worm handlers, fearing her valley could suffer the same fate as the city of Pejitei. The men of the valley are enraged, but Nausicaä calms them and says she will handle the situation. Back inside the castle, Nausicaä gives orders to prepare her personal glider, the Maeve, and the valley's gunship. She tells Mito to fly the gunship and provide cover for her. In the sky above the valley, Nausicaä takes off on her glider. The gunship follows close behind her. The scene returns to the field where the invaders are marching. Nausicaä flies her glider straight at them at high speed. She fires her rifle, hitting a worm handler and scattering the terrified mercenaries. The Toromechian commander orders his soldiers to hold their fire when he sees the valley's gunship flying towards them. After performing some quick aerial maneuvers, Nausicaä lands in the middle of the soldiers, planting her sword firmly in the ground. She introduces herself and angrily demands that they leave her land. The Toromechian commander explains they are on a mission from the emperor to search for traitors from Pejitei. Nausicaä refuses, declaring that her valley is an independent nation that has broken no treaties. She then notices a worm handler holding the crown that belonged to Princess Rastel. Horrified, Nausicaä realizes they have desecrated the princess's grave and becomes determined to protect the stone Rastel gave her. The worm handlers release small slug-like creatures which immediately swarm towards Nausicaä, drawn to the object she carries. The creatures begin to crawl up her body, but Nausicaä stands perfectly still with a look of fierce resolve. Suddenly, a powerful, unseen force throws the creatures off her body. They burrow into the ground to escape, leaving the worm handlers in shock. Enraged by this violation, Nausicaä declares she will not forgive the invaders. In response, a large armored soldier steps forward to challenge her to a duel. Watching from the valley's gunship, Mito is alarmed that she accepted the challenge. Soldiers on the Toromechian ship take aim at the valley gunship. As the duel is about to begin, Master Yupa arrives at the head of a small army of armed valley dwellers. He rides onto the field and shouts for the duelists to stop, catching the attention of both the Toromechian commander and the men of the valley. Yupa warns Nausicaä not to let her anger turn the valley into a battlefield. He worries that her rage has consumed her. Despite Yupa's plea, the fight begins. Nausicaä leaps at her heavily armored opponent, who swings a large axe. Their weapons clash with a shower of sparks. Using the soldier's momentum, Nausicaä vaults over his head and slashes his neck with a dagger as rain begins to fall. The men of the valley cheer loudly. The wounded soldier stumbles, groaning in pain. Nausicaä moves in to strike the final blow. Before she can, Master Yupa throws himself between them, catching her dagger with his armored glove. He holds them apart with his great strength, telling them not to move. Nausicaä warns that her dagger is made from an Ohmu shell and can easily cut through the soldier's armor. Yupa then addresses both armies, declaring that the duel must not have a winner, as it would only lead to a pointless and bloody war between their allied nations. He sternly questions the Toromechian soldiers, asking if they were ordered to incite a civil war, and reminding them that the people of the periphery will fight to the death to defend their right to self-rule. He then turns to his own people, telling them it is madness to risk the valley's future out of rash anger. Yupa gently takes Nausicaä's hand, which is still gripping the bloody dagger. He then confronts the Toromechian commander, demanding to know if she will let the duel continue and lead them all to mutual destruction. The commander, removing her mask to reveal she is a young woman named Kushana, praises Yupa's speech and agrees to sheathe her sword. As Yupa leads the wounded duelist away, the soldier suddenly collapses from their injury. Kushana orders her soldiers to carry the wounded aboard their ship, preparing for immediate departure. The men of the valley are shocked to see that the formidable commander is a young woman. Kushana apologizes for the intrusion and asks to inspect Nausicaä's sword. She remarks on its unusual lightness, and notices that Nausicaä had wiped the blood from it after her attack. With a powerful swing, Kushana shatters the Ohmu shell blade. She asks Nausicaä if they will meet again, and Nausicaä replies that it will probably be on a battlefield. Amused, Kushana laughs and says farewell as she and her soldiers depart. The scene changes to the sky, where the large Toramekian ship flies away from the valley. Back in the field, the people of the valley celebrate their victory with loud cheers. As the villagers celebrate, Nausicaä is filled with the horrifying realization that the soldier she fought was already dead before she moved to strike the final blow. A man from the valley gently urges the stunned princess to address her people. The crowd cheers for Nausicaä, calling her a true warrior and celebrating her victory over the imperial trooper. Master Yupa shows the cheering crowd his damaged gauntlet, which was pierced by Nausicaä's dagger, proving the force of her attack. An older man quietly suggests that Nausicaä should give the excited men something to do. Regaining her composure, Nausicaä orders everyone to clean up after the invaders by burning any toxic spores that may have reached the woods. She offers to bandage Yupa's hand, but he tells her not to worry and returns to the castle. The scene changes to the sky, where the Toramekian corvette flies away from the valley. The valley's gunship flies nearby and sends a formal signal of safe passage. On board the large warship, Commander Kushana is informed of the signal and orders a dismissive, formal reply to be sent. As she watches the valley's gunship turn back, she privately vows that she will one day have the ship under her command. Back in the valley, the people carry out Nausicaä's orders, using flamethrowers to cleanse the ground of spores. Later, inside the castle, an old woman called the Grandam bandages Yupa's hand, telling him that he was lucky not to have lost it. Yupa grimly tells her that the soldier was already dead from Nausicaä's first strike when he intervened to stop the duel. The scene shifts to the bedchamber of the sick King Gilles. The king tells Yupa that they should have used their gunship to kill all the invaders and hide the evidence. Yupa disagrees, believing it would only lead to more trouble. The king correctly guesses that the commander was Princess Kushana, the emperor's fourth daughter, and says they should have just given her the stone. In the woods of the Valley of the Wind, a group of men scaling a massive hollow tree call for Nausicaä. Inside, Nausicaä joins one of the men and sees that the ancient tree has been infested with bread fungus. She climbs higher into the tree to determine if it can be saved. The men wait anxiously at the base of the tree, understanding its great importance to the valley. Deep within the branches, Nausicaä presses her ear against the wood, listening intently. She experiences a vision and moves along a branch with a concerned look. Discovering blood on her knife, she grimaces with determination and stabs downwards into the tree. After another brief, strange vision, she slumps over in despair. Nausicaä returns to the ground and tells the sorrowful men that the tree cannot be saved, as the fungus has spread everywhere. An order is given to burn the tree at dawn before it can release its toxic spores. As the flames consume the ancient tree, Nausicaä stands nearby, mourning its loss. Later, while the exhausted men sleep in the woods, Nausicaä's fox squirrel Teto appears. The location changes to a quiet spot by the water, where Teto finds Nausicaä sitting alone, looking sad. The small animal leaps onto her back and licks her face to comfort her. Nausicaä is relieved that her companion has returned to her and holds him close. As she sits there, a narrator states that the Toramekian Empire has just declared war on the Dorok principalities. The story moves to a large Toramekian military camp where armies and aircraft are gathered for war. Near the flagship, a large crowd is assembled. Inside a command tent, a regal woman is introduced to a new officer. The woman cynically notes that her father has sent her another military attaché. The cloaked man introduces himself as Kurotoa, a staff officer assigned to her for the duration of the campaign, and addresses her as Princess Kushana. Kushana refers to Kurotoa as her new watchdog and asks him for a report on the main war front. Kurotoa explains that the Toramekian main forces, led by Kushana's 3 brothers, have successfully launched a surprise attack on the Dorok principalities. He reports that many Dorok fortresses have fallen and thousands of slaves have been taken. Kurotoa adds that the Dorok armies are in full retreat. He cheerfully concludes that the imperial capital is celebrating the victories of the 3 princes. Kushana angrily cuts him off. She complains that her own mission is meaningless, sending her to a desolate land of sandstorms and a rotting forest filled with insects. Kushana believes her assignment to cross the sea of corruption and find a stone is just an excuse by her family to get rid of her. Kurotoa tries to reassure her, saying the emperor has promised her great honors if she brings him the stone. Kushana dismisses him, stating that she does not have the stone, and orders him to leave. Outside, Kurotoa decides to explore the ruins of the city of Pejitei, where the camp is located. He declines a mount, preferring to walk. In another tent, Kushana's loyal retainers complain that her mission is a plot by her brothers, who have taken her best troops and likely accused her of hiding the stone from the emperor. They urge her to return to the capital, promising their lives in her service. Kushana refuses, saying such a move would be playing into her brother's hands. She reasserts her authority and orders a message sent to all local tribes, telling them to prepare for war in the emperor's name. Meanwhile, Kurotoa walks through the destroyed city of Pejitei, noting the waste of smashing a city of artisans. He passes wrecked railway lines and concludes the city will likely never be rebuilt. He descends a staircase and is stopped by 2 armored worm handler guards. Kurotoa identifies himself as a staff officer and asks to see their chief. The leader of the guards, Gowa, introduces himself, but Kurotoa complains about the smell of the worm handlers and orders to be taken to see it. As they walk, Kurotoa notes that the guards are being paid with looted goods. The location changes to a massive industrial mining structure within the ruins. Kurotoa is lowered deep into a mine shaft. Far below the city, in a vast cavern, Kurotoa is shown the source of the excavation, a massive, half-buried humanoid machine. He recognizes it as a god warrior, an ancient weapon of mass destruction, and is shocked to see it looks almost new. The machine has tubes connected to it that appear to be pulsing. Strange creatures swim in a fluid near its inner mechanics. The guard exclaims that after 1,000 years underground, the god warrior's heart is still beating. Kurotoa realizes that the engineers of Pejitei must have removed the machine's control stone to keep it dormant. He then suddenly shoves his guide off the high walkway, sending the man falling to his death. Kurotoa confirms the kill, suspecting this is why Kushana's other advisors have been having accidents. Gazing at the dormant giant, he imagines seizing control of it and even taking the throne for himself. Laughing, he realizes his ambition could lead to either fortune or his downfall. He speaks to the machine, predicting that its existence will cause the empire to erupt in a bloody civil war. Later that night, in her tent, Princess Kushana learns that Kurotoa managed to climb out of the pit alive, which does not surprise her. One of her retainers dismisses Kurotoa as a coward and no threat. Kushana considers this thoughtfully. As her attendants fit her armor, she thinks about her incompetent brothers and decides it is a good thing she does not have the control stone, resolving to leave it in the valley for a while longer. The story moves to the Valley of the Wind, where a fortress is built into a cliff under a starry sky. Inside a hangar, men work on their gunship. Master Yupa asks Mito to make room for his bird-like kai on their aircraft. Yupa explains that he is giving the kai to Nausicaä for her first mission, as the animal knows her well and will be a good companion on the battlefield. Mito agrees and orders his men to clear a space. The location changes to a stone corridor inside the castle. As Yupa and Mito walk, they discuss the upcoming departure at dawn. Yupa notes that Nausicaä's escorts are all old men. Mito explains that the princess chose them to protect the valley's youth, as their population is shrinking. Mito expresses his concern about their rendezvous point, which is located near the dangerous Sea of Corruption. Yupa realizes this means they might have to cross the toxic forest. They conclude that Nausicaä knows the mission is far more dangerous than a simple skirmish, which is why she chose not to bring any young people with her. The scene shifts to a room in the castle. 3 valley elders finish cutting Nausicaä's hair short. They help her into a suit of scale mail armor that they made for her, explaining that they have placed protective spells on every scale. They instruct her not to take it off, even while sleeping, until she is safely home. In a large communal room, surrounded by her people, Nausicaä jokes about the armor. An elder tells a group of children that it is their turn to say goodbye. The children approach Nausicaä, and one gives her a small pouch. Nausicaä is delighted to find it filled with Chico nuts. She thanks the children, who promise to pray to the god of the wind for her safety. Outside on the airfield, just before dawn, the men prepare the aircraft. Mito tells Yupa he is worried about Nausicaä, saying she has not been herself since her duel and is forcing herself to smile. He notes that she loves all living things, even the insects of the toxic forest. Yupa adds that she has a special power to hear voices that others cannot. He believes her power is meant to heal, not for war. Mito shows Yupa his own hand, hardened by forest poisons, and explains that all of Nausicaä's escorts are old men like him, serving out their final days. He and Yupa agree that they love her deeply and would make any sacrifice to protect her. As they walk on the castle grounds, Yupa urges Mito to keep her safe. The scene moves back to a castle corridor where Nausicaä's fox squirrel, Teto, is walking. Yupa sees the small animal and asks where its master is, as the night is almost over. Yupa follows Teto down a staircase into the castle foundations, a place no one usually goes. They pass through a large scrap heap of old machinery. Yupa watches Teto squeeze through an opening beside a large metal door and cautiously follows. He peeks inside and is shocked by what he sees. The location changes to Nausicaä's secret laboratory, a hidden room deep beneath the castle filled with glowing plants from the Sea of Corruption. Nausicaä is in the center of the garden, with Teto at her feet. As Yupa enters, Teto leaps onto his shoulder. Nausicaä turns to face him. Yupa is stunned and asks what she is doing with plants from the toxic forest. Nausicaä calmly explains she grew them from spores. She reassures him that the plants are not giving off poison and says it is a secret from the others in the valley who would be afraid. Yupa recognizes one of the most poisonous plants in the forest, amazed that it is able to flower. Nausicaä explains that when grown with clean water and soil, even toxic plants become beautiful and harmless. She states her discovery: the earth is polluted, not the plants themselves. Yupa is astonished that she figured this out alone. Nausicaa's expression turns sad as she tells him she has stopped watering the plants and they will soon die. She rushes to Yupa and hugs him, crying that she does not want to go to war. She confesses that she feels a terrible hatred inside her, that she is afraid she will not be able to control. She says she now understands the giant Ohmu, who kill out of overwhelming anger and then cry in sorrow. As the sun begins to rise, she says she has to go. Yupa has a profound realization that he has spent his life searching for the forest's secret, never realizing the answer was right in front of him, inside this girl. Master Yupa stands on the airfield, watching the valley's gunship prepare to leave. Men make final checks on the aircraft and the large cargo barge it will tow. The villagers, including the sick King Gilles, gather to say a prayer for a safe journey and return. The gunship takes off, towing the barge, with Nausicaä flying alongside in her personal glider. Their mission is to join other soldiers from the periphery kingdoms and meet with the Toromechian Empire's forces. The scene changes to an aerial battle. An enemy gunship emerges from the clouds, firing its weapons. Nausicaa expertly pilots her glider, engaging the enemy. She destroys the enemy ship in a large explosion. Soon after, another mysterious ship appears against the sun. It fires a powerful weapon before disappearing into the clouds. Mito seems to recognize the ship with a sense of dread. A call comes from the men on the towed barge. The elderly escorts are drunk and singing loudly. Mito yells at them to be quiet, threatening to cut them loose, but they mock him. Nausicaa smiles and tells Mito to let them be. She explains that this may be their last chance to breathe clean air without masks for a very long time. The convoy flies into the toxic air of the Sea of Corruption, and the crew puts on their protective masks. Nausicaa spots another ship flying alongside them in the miasma. It is an old, heavily patched ship from the allied kingdom of Pejitei. The crew of the Pejitei ship waves hello. They are shocked when they realize the valley's gunship is being piloted not by the king, but by his daughter, Nausicaa. They are shocked when they realize the valley's gunship is being piloted not by the king, but by his daughter, Nausicaa. Impressed, their commander orders them to fly in formation with her. Soon, they arrive at the rendezvous point and join a massive fleet of aircraft from all the periphery kingdoms. Nausicaa is happy to see so many ships have gathered. The other ships greet her warmly and welcome her into their formation. The location changes to the bridge of a large Toromechian transport ship. An officer named Kurotoa notes that they have arrived at the meeting point. The commander, a woman in ornate armor named Kushana, informs him that they will not be landing. She reveals her plan: to immediately lead the entire fleet south across the Sea of Corruption. This strategy is meant to trap the periphery forces, as their fast gunships are still tied to their slow cargo barges and cannot rebel. As the periphery fleet is sighted, Kurotoa expresses his admiration for Kushana's cruel but effective plan. The story flashes back to the Valley of the Wind, where Master Yupa visits the ailing King Gilles to say goodbye. Yupa explains that he believes he has finally found the key to understanding the forest's mystery and must continue his lifelong journey. Through a series of narrated memories, Yupa describes his observations. The Sea of Corruption is spreading at an alarming rate, having already consumed several countries. Human populations are declining as many children die young. He notes that, unlike slow natural ecological shifts of the past, the life forms of the toxic forest seem intent on destroying the old world. Yupa questions the religious belief that the forest is divine punishment for humanity's ancient pollution. He recalls a young Nausicaä making a similar point, wondering why innocent creatures would also be punished. Yupa then recounts a journey from his youth when he traveled deep into the heart of the Sea of Corruption. He found a pure and peaceful climax forest. He reveals a vial of sand from this place, which is made of a complex, non-poisonous metal alloy that is impossible to create with current technology. He remembers feeling like a monster in his protective gear while in that pristine environment. Hearing this, King Jill understands Yupa's theory. The Sea of Corruption was created to cleanse the polluted world. Yupa acknowledges it is just a hypothesis, but says Nausicaä has instinctively felt the same truth. He is determined to return to the forest's center to learn more. King Jill gives his friend his blessing, aware they may never meet again, and hopes Nausicaä can one day help Yupa in his quest. The story begins in the present day, with a large fleet of Toromechian and allied aircraft flying high above the Sea of Corruption. Inside the Valley gunship, a masked pilot is at the controls. The pilot points to a navigation screen as the fox squirrel Teto watches. As the gunship tows its barge over the forest, Nausicaä realizes she has never traveled this far into the Sea of Corruption. She feels a sense of unease, sensing a powerful feeling of hatred in the air. She recognizes that this feeling is not from the giant Ohmu. An elder asks if the men on the barge can remove their masks, pointing out that other crews have. Nausicaä tells them to wait, as she feels something is wrong. Nearby, another allied pilot complains about the slow Toromechian ships and their intimidating armed turrets. Suddenly, a flash appears in the sky. An object silhouetted against the sun reveals itself to be an enemy gunship, which attacks a large Toromechian transport. The attacker is a pilot from Pejitei. The large transport is hit and begins to fall apart. The explosion rocks Nausicaä's gunship and barge. Men on the barge recognize the attacking craft as belonging to Pejitei. Nausicaä realizes that the pilot must be the brother of Rastel, the princess of Pejitei. The Toromechian transport explodes completely. The explosion sends soldiers and debris flying through the air. Mito warns Nausicaä that they are about to collide with the wreckage. Nausicaä explains she cannot evade without risking the tow cable as they fly through the deadly debris field. Their gunship is hit, and Toromechian soldiers are struck and killed by the wreckage. Nausicaä's helmet is shattered, and she asks Mito if the barge is okay. Mito warns her of a new danger. The massive, burning bow of the destroyed transport is falling directly toward them. With grim determination, Nausicaä accelerates the gunship. She stands and uses a sword to sever the tow cable to the barge. With the cable cut, the barge begins to fall towards the toxic forest. Nausicaä cries out in despair. The barge plummets from the sky. Other Allied pilots report that several gunships and their barges have been lost in the chaotic battle, and they believe the Valley's barge is doomed. The location changes to low over the forest, where the crew of the falling barge is told to dump their cargo. Inside the barge, the men are in a panic, believing they are about to die. One suggests they blow themselves up rather than crash into the toxic forest. Having boarded the falling barge, Nausicaä yells at the men to calm down and prepare for an emergency landing, ordering Mito to cut the engine. The crew is stunned by her sudden appearance. Nausicaä shouts her orders again over the loud engine. To make herself heard, she briefly removes her mask, enduring the pain of the toxic miasma. She is shown leaping from her gunship to the barge, where she reassures the crew that she will save them and tells them to lighten the load. The crew, shocked but inspired, agrees to follow her orders. Back on her glider, Nausicaä asks for a mask, and the crew's panic gives way to hope. Nausicaä puts on the mask and gives the crew a reassuring thumbs up. She instructs them to restart the engine so they can find a place to land. Watching from the gunship, Mito is impressed by her ability to command and end the panic. The scene changes to the Pejitei pilot, Asbel, who realizes he also needs to find a place to land. Nausicaä feels a burning pain in her chest from the miasma she inhaled. The story returns to the aerial battle, where Toromechian gunners are firing at the lone Pejitei attacker. The Pejitei gunship uses the sun for cover as it dives toward another transport. On the bridge of the lead ship, an officer named Kurotowa confirms the attacker is from Pejitei. He sarcastically remarks to his commander, Princess Kushana, that she should have caught the pilot when her forces took the city of Pejitei. Kushana dismisses his sarcasm and tells him to focus on the battle. Another transport ship is hit by enemy fire. Its rudder is destroyed, and the pilot sends a final farewell message as it goes down. Kushana's initial sorrow quickly turns to cold resolve. Kurotowa berates his pilot for not fighting back effectively. He shoves the pilot aside and takes control of the smaller corvette himself, warning Kushana that the flight is about to get rough. Kushana gives him permission to act as the enemy closes in. The corvette launches from the main transport ship to engage the enemy. Asbel's gunship dives through the smoke from the burning transports. Kurotowa performs sharp maneuvers that throw his crew around. He pilots the corvette through the thick smoke, using it as cover. An observer notes that Kurotowa's tactic of using the smoke for concealment is dangerously clever. Kurotowa waits for the perfect moment, then bursts out of the smoke cloud and opens fire on Asbel's ship. Asbel's gunship is hit and begins to trail smoke. A Toromechian soldier celebrates, but Kurotowa states the enemy is only damaged. Kurotowa is impressed with Asbel's skill as a pilot. Asbel manages to get behind the corvette, and his return fire destroys one of its gun turrets. Nausicaä is shocked by an explosion. Another Toromechian ship is hit and destroyed. Small figures are seen falling from the wreckage. Nausicaä realizes with horror that it is happening again. Dozens of Toromechian soldiers fall through the air. Mito remarks that they are jumping to escape the fire. Nausicaä is distraught, especially when she sees what appear to be children, two young cadets falling while holding each other. She is enraged that cadets were brought on such a dangerous mission. After another massive explosion, she slumps over her controls, crying. Mito calls out in alarm as Nausicaä's aircraft goes into a steep dive. Overcome with grief, but filled with new resolve, Nausicaä sends a powerful telepathic command for the fighting to stop. As the Toromechian ships take more damage, her silent plea continues, begging the pilot not to kill anyone else. She directs her thoughts specifically to the brother of Rastel. Asbel hears her voice in his mind, interrupting his rage. He looks around his cockpit in confusion, wondering where the voice is coming from. Asbel then has a psychic vision of a crying young girl appearing in his cockpit, begging him to stop. The vision shifts to an image of the girl floating in a dark void. Asbel realizes the little girl is crying. He asks the apparition who she is and why she is crying. As he reaches out to her, she looks up and he asks for her name. She telepathically tells him her name is Nausicaä. The vision then fades away. Asbel is left stunned and silent by the experience. His focus returns just as he realizes what happened. Distracted, he looks up too late to avoid colliding with Nausicaä's gunship. His damaged aircraft tumbles out of the sky and crashes into the ground in a massive explosion. Aboard the Toromechian corvette, a gunner cheers, and a relieved Kurotoa notes how close the battle was. Inside the heavily damaged Toromechian command ship, a surviving soldier observes the carnage. Kushana silently holds a wounded man, surveying the devastation. She tells her soldiers that she will never forget their loyalty in shielding her with their own bodies. Purotoa reports their severe losses and asks if they should retreat. Kushana refuses, ordering the fleet to regroup and continue south as planned. She states that they will bury their dead at the encampment. Kurotoa is surprised to see what might be a tear in his commander's eye. The damaged fleet begins to regroup. The location changes to low over the Sea of Corruption, where Nausicaä and Mito are flying their gunship over a body of water within the toxic jungle. In the toxic jungle, known as the Sea of Corruption, several gunships fly over a body of water. The pilots wear protective masks as spores fill the air. Nausicaä decides they should make an emergency landing on the water. The three valley gunships land in formation. One craft lands roughly, sending up a large splash. As the crew emerges onto their floating aircraft, one is visibly damaged and partially submerged. Mito reassures a remorseful Nausicaä, telling her not to worry about what happened during the battle. As the crew works to secure the damaged craft to the barge, Mito tells Nausicaä to rest. While sitting on her glider, Nausicaä looks out at the strange landscape. She gazes into the water, which is so clear she can see the massive roots below, and wonders what happened to the enemy pilot she fought. Suddenly, Nausicaä senses a presence and looks up to see a wall of glowing eyes in the dark forest. Their aircraft is jolted by something moving beneath the water. The source is revealed to be giant, multi-eyed insects called Ohmu. A colossal Ohmu surfaces directly in front of Nausicaä. Her crew panics, realizing they have landed in an Ohmu nest. Nausicaä orders her men to be quiet and hold their fire, saying she will try to communicate with the creatures. The gigantic Ohmu surround their craft. They extend numerous golden, sensory tentacles which gently envelop Nausicaä. She stands still and mentally pleads with them, telling them she is not an enemy. Her crew watches in horror as the tentacles consume her form and begin to probe their aircraft. In a psychic vision, Nausicaä again pleads with the creatures. The vision ends, and back on the water, the Ohmu's tentacles retract from her. The massive insects then begin to swim peacefully away. The crew rushes to a weakened Nausicaä. Gikari expresses his amazement that she calmed the Ohmu without weapons. Mito holds her and grows alarmed when he realizes she is freezing cold. The other crewmen believe her condition is the result of looking into the Ohmu's mind. Nausicaä recovers and pushes Mito away, urgently stating that something the Ohmu warned her about is about to begin. She asks if her personal glider, the Meve, is still on board. Just then, a giant insect, known as a wingworm, descends from the sky, and Nausicaä demands that her crew unload the Meve so she can leave. As she runs along the wing, she shouts that the entire forest is awakening. Their aircraft is swarmed by agitated insects. A vast swarm can be seen gathering in the sky. An Ohmu erupts from the water, called by the wingworms. The crew observes that the Ohmu's eyes are a calm blue color at first. In an instant, however, the eyes flash to a deep, enraged crimson. A wave crashes against their ship as a crewman identifies the color as the one used for attacking. Nausicaä says that it has already started as a full-scale Ohmu stampede begins. Ignoring her crew's pleas to stay, Nausicaä prepares to take off on her glider. She orders them to take flight as soon as possible, wait for her for 1 hour, and then continue to their encampment if she has not returned. As Nausicaä flies through the toxic sky of the Sea of Corruption, a single spore floats past her glider. The scene changes to a location on the ground where a figure in a mask, Asbel, is reunited with his small, cat-like companion. High above, Nausicaä spots the creature, Teto, and calls its name. The animal is now on the glider with her, and she scolds it for following her into such danger. Back on the ground, Asbel is thrown from his crashed aircraft. Nausicaä quickly places Teto inside her glider's cockpit for safety. Asbel falls into a deep chasm within the Sea of Corruption. While flying, Nausicaä is struck by something and must pilot her glider down a narrow canyon to avoid laser fire from a pursuer. Meanwhile, on the water, her crew argues on the barge, with one man refusing to abandon her. The pursuing enemy aircraft emerges from the toxic mist. The chase continues through a large canyon, with the enemy ship following Nausicaä's small glider. The location changes to a deep insect nest. A mass of insects can be seen hatching from their pupae. Asbel crawls through the field of insect eggs and runs along a large petrified tree branch to escape a swarm of creatures below. He shoots into the swarm and prepares for a fight, realizing he is overwhelmed by their numbers. A large crab-like insect attacks him. Asbel fights back with his sword, but finds himself surrounded by more large creatures and a cloud of flying insects. He prepares to throw his last grenade. The grenade explodes in a bright flash, stunning the swarm. Asbel loses his balance and begins to fall, surrounded by the stunned insects. In another part of the forest, a different pilot in a studded helmet blows a hole in a giant petrified tree. He discovers the trunk is hollow and enters, aiming his rifle at a large insect inside. The insect attacks, spraying him with a thick fluid. The pilot struggles to free himself from the sticky substance. The fluid begins to harden and crystallize, causing the entire tree to crack apart. The pilot is thrown off balance as the tree disintegrates around him, and he realizes with horror that it is made of sand. He screams as he is carried down a massive sandfall into a deep chasm. He falls towards a swarm of large winged insects below, seeing his terrified reflection in one of their giant eyes just before impact. Nausicaä swoops in on her glider, rescuing the falling Asbel from a similar fate. A brief flashback shows Asbel in a recent battle. Now together on the glider, Nausicaä and Asbel are attacked by a giant insect's tentacle, but manage to pull free and speed away. As night falls, 2 winged insects pursue them. Asbel warns Nausicaä that the glider cannot handle the weight of 2 people. Nausicaä tells him to get a special flute from her pouch. Asbel reaches in, but is shocked to find a small, carved stone instead. By daytime, 3 insects are chasing them. In a brief moment, Asbel attempts to calm a massive Ohmu with a flute. Back on the glider, an insect's tentacle smashes the flute just as Asbel is about to draw his gun. Nausicaä stops him from shooting the creature. She strikes him to get his attention and tells him to hold on as she pushes the glider into a steep vertical climb. The jet engine roars, blasting them straight up into the sky and away from the pursuing insects below. The sound of their escape agitates more insects deep within the forest. Now flying level, a frustrated Asbel grabs Nausicaä and asks why she refuses to fight. She tells him there has been enough killing and directs his attention to a colossal swarm of insects pouring from the forest ahead. Nausicaä knows their normal tools for scaring insects away will no longer work. The enraged insects fly towards them. Nausicaä spots a narrow gap between the giant fungal trees and steers the glider towards it. Their path is suddenly blocked by a monstrous, multi-eyed insect. More creatures close in from behind. Nausicaä throws a flash grenade to stun one of their pursuers, and Asbel shouts in amazement at her incredible flying skills. They finally escape into a huge, quiet cavern deep beneath the forest, and Asbel breathes a sigh of relief. Nausicaä's relief is cut short by a new, terrifying sight. They have flown directly in front of a giant Ohmu. Suddenly, the glider lurches and goes out of control. Asbel is thrown off, plummeting into the dark chasm below. Nausicaä watches in horror as he falls. Asbel's fall is cushioned by a large insect, but he finds himself sinking into a pit of living quicksand made of smaller insects. He desperately yells for Nausicaä to get away and save herself. Before she can act, a massive winged insect lunges at the helpless Asbel. His mask is knocked from his face, and he gasps as he breathes the toxic air. Asbel is pulled into a pit of quicksand made of living insects. Nearby, Nausicaä is also ensnared by giant tentacles and dragged under the surface. In a confusing, dreamlike sequence, Asbel imagines himself on top of a giant, multi-eyed insect called an Ohmu, raising his sword to strike it. A powerful, disembodied voice tells him to stop killing, but he attacks anyway. He then sees Nausicaä falling helplessly into a deep chasm. The giant Ohmu shoots out a mass of long, golden tendrils that gently catch Nausicaä in mid-air. Mistakenly believing the creature means to harm her, Asbel runs across the cavern floor and attacks the tendrils with his sword, demanding that it release her. The Ohmu easily flings him away with one of its tendrils, causing him to fall to the ground and lose his sword. The massive creature then calmly lowers the unconscious Nausicaä to the sand, using its tendrils to heal her injuries before placing her mask beside her. Asbel rushes to her side and desperately tries to put the mask back on, afraid she will die from breathing the toxic air. Suddenly, Asbel is stunned to hear a voice speaking directly into his mind. He realizes the Ohmu is communicating with him telepathically. The Ohmu explains that it has spared Asbel's life only because Nausicaä pleaded for him. It tells him to depart, assuring him that Nausicaä will not die. In a vision, the Ohmu tells Nausicaä that its kind must now leave this forest and travel to another one far to the south. The colossal creature says a final farewell to Nausicaä before turning and disappearing among a forest of petrified trees, leaving Asbel alone with her at the bottom of the sea of corruption. Nausicaä's small fox squirrel, Teto, nudges her awake. She sits up in amazement, realizing she can breathe perfectly without her mask. Asbel joyfully exclaims that they have been saved, as there is no toxic miasma in this deep cavern. He looks up in wonder at the vast, glowing, subterranean world. He watches Nausicaä and thinks to himself that she is a wondrous girl who reminds him of his sister, Rastel. Nausicaä then experiences a traumatic flashback to her childhood. She remembers being confronted by her father and his men because she was secretly protecting a baby Ohmu. Her father believed she was possessed by the insects and demanded she hand it over, stating that humans and insects could not live together. When she refused, a man raised a weapon to strike her as she screamed for them not to kill the small creature. The vision ends, and Nausicaä awakens again in the cavern, finding she is wearing Asbel's jacket. She gets up and marvels at the beautiful scenery. A short time later, Asbel finds his crashed gunship and returns. They formally introduce themselves. Nausicaä confirms she knows he is the brother of a girl named Rastel, leaving Asbel stunned. After their conversation, Asbel quietly processes the news of his sister's death, finding some small comfort in how she died. Nausicaä gives him a small carved stone that Rastel had asked her to deliver. Asbel admits he had already found it in Nausicaä's pouch after they crashed. He tells her it is probably for the best that she does not know the stone's purpose. Nausicaä finds that her glider's engine is broken. Asbel, an experienced mechanic, confidently offers to repair it. He begins the long process of fixing the damaged parts without his proper tools. While he works, Nausicaä wanders into the petrified forest and finds her lost pouch along with her supply of nuts. She sits peacefully as a shower of glowing spores falls from the cavern ceiling, realizing that the pure sand around them is made from the harmless, crystallized remains of the toxic forest. That night, they discuss her discovery. Nausicaä explains her theory that the entire forest exists to cleanse the polluted world created by past civilizations. Asbel realizes with horror that this means humanity is the true source of the world's pollution. By the next day, the glider is repaired. Asbel gives Nausicaä his breathing mask and says he must stay behind, as the glider is too underpowered for 2 people and they only have 1 mask. Nausicaä refuses to leave him, understanding that he had planned to sacrifice himself all along. She insists they will leave together, and begins removing her heavy armor to reduce their weight. She breaks the mask into 2 pieces so they can share it, assuring him it will be enough to get them through the miasma. They prepare for takeoff by having Nausicaä sit on Asbel's shoulders as he lies prone to pilot the glider, a position that will help them catch a strong updraft. As they leave, an explosion destroys Asbel's gunship behind them. Together, on the glider, they ascend out of the pure cavern and fly up through the toxic layers of the Sea of Corruption.